Yeah, I'm Jackson. I have zero experience with carpentry.
I studied at a school for historic preservation in Boston and learned about how things were built, 250 years ago.
There's a long way to go. I'm nowhere near the top. Not that I thought I was, but there's so much more to do out there.
Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. We are here talking with a really special guest, the 100-Year Window. 100-Year Window, we're glad to have you on. Let him talk. So today we're talking about windows. Obviously, we did the door video, and I think we got a lot of positive feedback from that. And so we were going to talk about this time, what should a window cost? Not in just what should a window cost, but that will be one of our main points later on. But we're going to talk about the different parts of a window, the history behind windows. If you look at a lot of older buildings, especially back in like Greek and Roman times, there weren't a lot of windows, and we're going to learn why.
Correct, Jackson. That's true. We are going to do that. So the
astute observation, probably.
Yeah, everything you wanted to know about windows, but we're afraid to ask. That's our topic today. So it's a relevant topic today because as we build our 100-year window and get feedback, good and bad, from people.
What's the 100-year window?
Well, I'll get into that because we're going to be talking about vinyl windows. Richard, you talked a number of times about that story of the plastic or vinyl window that was just literally breaking and falling apart.
It's a great story.
From the UV rays, right? And
yeah.
So what's the deal with windows? Why are they making them out of vinyl? Why are they making them out of plastic and fiberglass and all these other things? So we're going to talk about windows and how to make good window choices and kind of some thinking behind them.
What's the deal with windows? That's all I could think of. He said, what's the deal with windows? I just went to Jerry.
Why don't you try to tell us the parts of this window, Jackson?
All right, game on. So, crud.
And just to be fair, I don't know all the parts.
I think I know that it's a double hung window.
That's true.
Can y'all just tell me if I'm right or wrong?
Yes, that's true. What is the...
I'm scared. Okay, so Munton.
No.
But what's a double hung window?
Both sides move, right? Isn't
both
that
what move?
panes? No, this is the window pane. Both, I don't know. What is this? What is the whole thing called?
Sash. Sash.
This is a sash?
That's a sash.
I thought a sash was this.
No, so you got an upper and lower sash in a double hung window.
The upper sash moves, and you might hear some wobble-dobbling. That's because the upper sash is not weather stripped. And there's a piece of weather stripping on the sides here. It's like copper and nailed in. Okay, Munton, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Same
Rail?
as a door. Same as a door, yeah.
Okay, so
there
style
you
rails
go.
and window, and then the pane. Window sill. That's all I know. Is it sill or seal? I've been afraid to ask.
Is it seal?
Sill or seal?
Is it
It's
window?
sill, S-I-L-L.
Okay.
Okay, and you got an exterior sill, seal,
Seal.
S-I-L-L. See,
Yeah.
I'm
Seal,
confused.
yeah.
and an interior sill, and then the lower part underneath the interior sill is an apron.
So this is the apron?
Well, there's not an apron there. There's
Be a
usually
piece of molding.
trim that's
So yeah, this is an uninstalled window, but the apron would be a part of the house. That would be part where you like
interior
set it in.
trim. Yep.
Interior trim. Okay.
Yep. And you'd have a casing that would go around the
The
outside.
casing would go here, and it would actually cover where you
Right.
can see the
And
pulleys.
what you've got there with the screws in it, those are adjustable stops.
These are adjusted.
It's a stop.
You can see these screws. That's the stop. What does that mean? The stop. Is that how high it's going to go?
It keeps the window from falling out, so it's stopping the window.
Okay, got it. Well, cool. What did I miss, guys? Richard, did you see anything that I was like, you should have said this?
Did you mention the weights and pulleys?
Well, yeah, and that's to make it move easier, right?
Yeah, it's to offset the weight of the window. So from what I understand, this and the other one on the other side weigh exactly as much as this. Mm-hmm. So you have to weigh the sash with the glass and hardware, then you, I guess, cut this to size, it looks like.
Yeah, those was probably an 8-pound weight. We had to cut it so that it's closer to a 5-pound weight.
And this is pure lead, so really good for...
But you'll see on that side of that weight, there's a number, and it says 8 or something like that. It's actually in the...
Oh, right here.
Yeah. So there's a...
Eight.
there's a number right there, and that tells you how much it weighs. Can't read it very well. Yeah. And that's a chain rope versus a rope versus a cotton rope.
Do you guys typically go with the chain, or do y'all go with the cotton?
90% of the stuff we do is originally cotton sash rope. Okay. It's a lot of parts to the window. It's called sash rope, but
confusing even
anyway.
For a master.
But here's the deal. Let me back up. Windows historically, like going back to English times. Okay, glass was always the technological piece that was the hardest, was the greatest barrier. Okay. They couldn't make glass in very big sizes, and glass was a technology that was very difficult to make. And so even getting up to this size piece of glass would have been a huge piece of glass.
This size?
In like 1650, right? It had been like unheard of, that big a piece.
How did they make it back then?
Well, they spun it, okay, and it was called crown glass or table glass, and they'd actually stick it into a furnace. They'd stick their ball into the furnace, they'd cut it open, and then with centrifugal force, they'd spin the rod, and that thing would just kind of grow out, right?
So this is their rod, and then this is so it's like a perpendicular, and so they would spin their rod like that.
They would put it in the furnace, and they'd start spinning it, and then they'd bring it out of the furnace. They would continue to spin it, and it would and so they could get a disc that was probably 3 feet wide, like glass.
But that's bigger than that.
I know, but you only have, in the middle is the rod where the rod comes into it, right? And so
you got to cut around that.
You got to cut around that, and so you might get two pieces like that out of a single piece. I'm just telling you that was a huge piece of glass in the,
and that would take a while
pre-1750,
to spin and everything.
Completely handmade, and all that stuff. And then they went to cylinder glass, and cylinder glass was, instead of spinning it, they'd actually get up on a table, and they would throw the glass down so the glass would stretch. And so you get it to a long cylinder that stretches out like that, and they're literally blowing it, swinging it down, and then
exhausting.
Put it back into the furnace, and you'd have these long tubes that were like 4, 5, 6 feet long, that then they snap off the little rod, they lay it down, they cut it, it opens up, and that's how they make the piece of glass. And then cylinder glass goes until the 1920s, 1930s.
Oh my gosh.
And it's not until 1940 that they come with float glass. And float glass is these furnaces that run literally for like 10 years without stopping. And
seriously?
Because once you start it, you can't stop it. Because it's this continuous process of pouring the molten glass into these conveyor belts to end up laying the glass over molten tin, and so that you get this perfectly smooth piece of glass that you can see through. Now, this is actually restoration glass, because you can see some bubbles and stuff in it, and there's some imperfections in it, and you can still get restoration glass that's still handmade the old way.
Cylinder?
It'd be historic. It'd be new cylinder glass.
That is crazy.
So it's new glass that's made in a way that looks old.
Yes. So glass was always the big deal, and so the reason, like in Charleston, the reason those houses turned perpendicular to the street, because they were taxed by the amount of glass that faced the street. So they literally turned the face of the house perpendicular to the street, and you see these side porches and things that you walk on in Charleston, but there was 4 windows on the street side instead of 10. And so the glass and taxing glass was a tax on the rich. Especially in Elizabethan England, that when they were doing that, it was a sign of wealth. So that, considering that we're still using cylinder glass into the 1920s and 30s, and if you've ever had a client go, our windows are failing, you're like, what do you mean they're failing? Well, the glass is all wavy now. And they were thinking that the glass had actually started falling. I've had people tell me that, and it's not. You know what I'm saying? They would see the waves in that and go, oh, the glass is failing.
So there's not as many waves in this one that I've seen in some of the historic houses, but they usually look like streaks.
They can
look really distorted, yeah.
Like this building is 1921, and glass was graded A, B, and C. You would have had C glass in a warehouse like ours, is tons of wave in the original glass over there, and a nice house would have had an A, right? Yeah, you can see it in that glass there.
TV's blocking your view, Richard.
And so glass was the technology piece that moved everything. And really, if you think about it, you don't have aluminum windows, which is a 1950s product, and vinyl and fiberglass and all these things until after we kind of conquered the glass thing. And so
where was Anderson?
Anderson actually originally made frames.
Just the frames.
Just the frames. And then they go back to the early 1900s. But they're one of the oldest production, window makers.
So I've heard that before of people saying like, yeah, the glass got distorted. It's getting
old.
But it was made. Glass doesn't move.
Glass doesn't move. It's a 1,000-year product. Right. It's ridiculous to sit there to think that would actually slump. Now, leaded glass, okay, the glass isn't failing, but the lead that separates the pieces of glass called caming actually will slump, and you'll actually see huge bubbles and stuff in it. And so I think that's probably why they're confused, because they'll say it's slumping, but regular pane glass doesn't slump. It will sit the same for 1,000 years. The leaded glass, because the lead's so soft, will actually slump.
Okay.
What is leaded glass? Do they put like a layer
stained glass you'd see in a church or something like that?
Yeah.
Those pieces of individual glass that make up a picture of Jesus with the lamb or whatever they're doing are all separated by a thin piece of lead.
I didn't know that was lead. That's interesting.
And so that lead will slump and get soft.
Because it's a really
soft
movable
product.
metal.
Usually get unleaded glass.
Yeah.
I had to do it. Diesel, actually.
Yeah.
So consider that there was nothing but wood windows before 1940. Okay. So, a cheap window was cheaper glass and was, no weather stripping and things like that. Mm-hmm. But, you didn't have the variety of cheapness that you do today with windows.
Wow. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I realize is like, people say, well, why would I buy this thing when it costs this much? Well, it's because now you have all these cheap options to compare it to.
Yeah.
It's like going to Central Market versus McDonald's. It's like, what? I can get food at McDonald's, but it's not the same food.
Right.
But you do have that comparison now. So everybody's mind is like warped on that. It's like they want the cheap thing.
Well, and it started by you asking, why did we do the 100-year window? Realize that as those cheaper products came out, like aluminum and extruded aluminum and fiberglass and vinyl, the wood market, right, the wood window market has been shrinking. And so in order to gain market share or maintain market share, they've cheapened their product a great deal. And the story that we're telling, or the story is
we're lying about it.
Yeah, the lie I'm telling people is that what's happened is, we did a really nice house. Richard worked on that house with the Palladian window. All those windows were brand new windows. Okay, wood windows from a large production manufacturer.
Shout out
in there in 17 years ago. And
was that all 17
years ago, and they were completely rotted out.
As in, they were wood.
Yeah,
they were okay.
Yeah, and so at the same time, we were on these commercial restoration projects, doing courthouses and pulling windows out, pulling the sash out of a project like this, and restoring the windows and putting them back in. They were already 100 years old, and we were restoring them to last another 30, 40, 50 years before they needed to be touched up. And
the sash,
and sometimes the frames. And so, good ones, Jackson.
Pay attention.
But here we were on the commercial side, restoring 100-year windows and that to last another 50 years. And on the residential side, we were like, wait a minute, this window's already rotting out. These things don't last anything. Why can't we build windows like we used to build?
Yeah.
And so we've gone back to building a very traditional window that's meant to last 100 years.
Yeah.
So this 100-year window is basically you guys seeing like working on the historical buildings and being like, we need to remake this because it lasts.
Why aren't we doing this? Mm-hmm. Right? Why aren't we building this? We know it lasts 100 years. Why aren't we doing it? The truth is, or a large part of I'm lying again. Yeah. So the reason that those things last so long was the virgin growth wood. So the whole thing about the 100-year window.
What does that mean? Sorry, virgin growth wood.
So
Man loves a woman.
America. okay, in America, remember, we Mayflower, right? We get come to all the wood, okay, is first generational. It's been growing there for 200, 300, 400 years.
Sweet. Okay.
So it's first growth, first cut. Okay. And we didn't run out of first cut lumber until like 1920, 1930. So all the wood that we use, all the wood that, up until 1930 was first cut, first generation, meaning it was tight growth rings. It was a lot of heartwood. It lasted a very long time.
So are you telling me every forest in America has been...
Yes.
Okay.
He's just, yes.
Cut twice, if not 3 times.
Wow.
Wow.
So when Dave Reichert, when our lumberyard was talking about second cut and third cut, that's what he's talking about.
What about the lumberyard? The redwoods.
You still have the great sequoias in the Sequoia National Forest, but though that's
a preservation.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's a
You
national
show up with
park.
a chainsaw.
Yeah.
It's a national park.
Can you imagine?
that you can't cut that wood anymore.
Okay. Cool.
So the windows that you were pulling out, what species of wood are they?
So
in the courthouses.
Well, that's
yes.
a good question.
The other thing is, and this is kind of getting into wood geeky, but because of the way the country grew across and going west, you would actually find types of wood changing, okay, based on time period. And so all the woods in Minnesota, Wisconsin, all the way over to New York and Ohio and up into Maine were eastern white pine. Okay, that was the species of wood. That was the premium species of wood that they used. By 1860, 1870, the reason why they also harvested those trees that way is because they could get them down the river. Okay, there was a river system that they were able to float them down. The next batch of trees were in the south, and that's where the longleaf pine lumber comes from. And it's all, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Florida, all just big swaths of cypress and longleaf pine. Those were harvested from 1870 into about early 1900s. And the reason they were able to harvest those is because of the railroad was able to back a train into those woods. Then you go out west and you see the firs and the redwoods and the things. So if you've got a building in 1920 and I had fir windows in this building, I would say this was much later, okay?
Because it was the second round.
It was the West Coast, right? Because you'd have had to gone out you'd have to go out the West Coast. I would say, well, these were probably installed in the 40s or 50s. Because in 1910 we weren't really harvesting fir in Texas to bring it from the West Coast to bring it here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you can specify the species. Majority of it is tidewater red cypress, okay, southern wood, or longleaf pine.
That's the railroad.
Yeah.
Right.
And the other when we did the Ellis County Courthouse, the interior doors were eastern white pine and the outside windows were longleaf yellow pine. You're like, what happened there?
Because eastern white is the East Coast
right,
one, and then the longleaf is the
south.
Railroad south.
How did an eastern white pine door end up in Texas, right? Because eastern white pine doesn't grow in Texas. They never would have been harvested here. Well, what you had happen is it was early in Texas history. The mills weren't up and running very good. So it was the St. Louis mill that and they are fed by the eastern white pine trees of Michigan and things like that. They were building in eastern white pine and shipping by railroad to Texas, and that's how an eastern white pine and door ended up in Texas.
Oh.
So anyway, that's geeky. That's really weird. But
I think people like to know
No,
that.
I liked it.
I feel like that's really interesting.
Well, because you see it change as the industry changes.
It does, and
so you get the railroad.
When I'm sleuthing a house, right? You can, that's the wood. No, that wood never would have been here. You can actually do that with wood, with nails, with all these different things. But the wood's the key, and so we're building our window with sapele, okay, which is a tropical hardwood, very similar to mahogany. And it's very straight grain, it's very dense, and it lasts a very long time. So we are specifically choosing a wood that's going to last a long time, knowing that if we get the wood right, we've got 90% of it right.
What's the other 10% when it comes to doing
slope of the exterior sill, This is the
This
interior
side over
sill.
here.
Oh, okay. Oh, I feel it.
Making sure that water doesn't run into there, right? The quality in building so that the joints are really tight. But it also, just the extremeness of the, wherever it is. For instance, if you put that window on the face of a building in a southern exposure, in Texas or in a western exposure with the sea, that's a very challenging, location for a window to perform well.
There's a lot of salt in the air, a lot of UV rays.
Yeah.
What else?
Those two
Those are the
things.
big ones,
Yeah.
okay.
And so salt just eats things up.
Yeah.
And so those are the other 10%. It's just where it's sitting and condition and stuff like that, and then how well it's built. So the other thing that we get, the other real piece of the 100-year window was I can't do a 100-year window if I'm going to use insulated glass, because insulated glass is a 10 to 20-year product. And so because if you've ever been in your house and the seal between the two glasses fails, it gets all chalky and cloudy and everything else, that is a failure, okay? And most modern window manufacturers today will say, we got to replace your window because your glass has failed. Wow. So they have introduced obsolescence into their products so that they can keep, every 20 years give you a new window.
Intended obsolescence.
It's a mess. And here's the other, racket in the modern production window thing is that they'll also do that with profiles. They'll do that with cladding.
Change the profile a little bit.
Yeah, they'll change the profile. And they go, we can't match that profile exactly. We'll have to give you a new window because you can't. And so all of a sudden you're buying a whole new window because you're trying to replace a 20-year sash, and you can't do that. And so the great thing about historic windows is that all these parts and pieces that we made are completely reproducible. If that bottom rail, rots out, we can replace it. We can take that sash out, knock the rail out, put a new rail in, put the mutton back in, reglaze it, and you're brand new. You can't do that with with new windows.
Well, I'm building that French casement window,
that looks
and it's
great.
going to be, thank you. It's going to be single pane glass, just because I'm kind of just copying you, to be honest. Just taking pictures, just like I could build that.
Do.
Yeah,
I don't know any better.
Thomas Jefferson did that. So.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, it's a good way of doing it.
But yeah, on my videos, like one of the biggest things people have been saying is like, I hope you're putting, the double pane glass. I'm like, no, I'm putting single pane glass. Oh, it's not gonna last. It's not energy efficient. Yada yada yada. And I don't really know a lot about energy efficiency, but I do know that glass is ugly, and I don't like it. That double. Well, I'm doing a little bit of remodeling the back half of my house, and I was like, man, I really like building doors and stuff, but I don't know if I have the time because I want to put French doors centered on the back wall. And I was like, well, let me just go look. So we went up to a building supply place, and the muntin on that doors I was looking at was like 1.5 inches wide. I was like, ooh, that is ugly. I might have to build these things. And I'm like, I see the struggle people have. Like I have a budget. I have limited time. I considered buying doors, but the passion for craft in me just will not let me buy muntins that are that fat.
Yeah.
But they're that fat because they're trying to hide the black strip that's in between the two pieces of glass. So they can't really get around it.
Interesting.
So glass is a whole nother ball of yarn. and so it's
Let's keep tugging at it.
it's challenging because here's the reality. Okay, we're in Texas. Okay, our median temperature in Fort Worth, Texas is 68 degrees. We have some days that and so put that in perspective, we're trying to heat and cool our houses around 72, right? So we're 4 degrees in median time from that. Doesn't cost a lot of energy in order to get you to 72, right? Whereas if you're in Minnesota or in Ontario, some of our listeners are, their median temperature is probably, 40, right?
Yeah.
And so they've got a much harder time and these longer winter spells. And so the other thing is that insulated glass is great for keeping heat in a building. It isn't great for keeping heat out, okay? we've got heat gain issues, right? Heat is our problem. The sun is our problem, not cold weather. And so to buy insulated glass, to think that it's going to help you with your energy bills or help you with your, the energy efficiency just isn't there. The statistics aren't there. I mean, a single pane of glass has an R value of 1. Mm-hmm. A double pane glass has an R value of 2. And a triple pane glass has an R value of 3, okay? So
what's an R value, if you wouldn't mind? Sorry.
Well, we talk about R value as if you think about a wall and an insulation being, R10, R16, R14, R22. Ceilings are supposed to be R32 or 38.
So it's how well it regulates.
It's how well it keeps the heat and cold from transferring into your
It's like a thermal break.
Yeah.
Like it's stopping it from coming in.
Okay. And so most walls, right, a 2x4 wall will be R14, right? When you compare the 14 versus 1, right, or even 14 versus 2, there's not a big difference.
Right.
And so, there's so much information here. The problem is that our energy bills, okay, only about 40% of, if you got a $100 energy bill, only about 30 to 40% of that is spent on heating and cooling. To expect that you can change the glass from an R1 to an R2
and then see a noticeable
difference in only the 30% of your energy bill, it just doesn't happen. And so the statistics are it's 40 to 120 years to expect a repay on changing out historic windows to insulated glass windows or to new windows, and to expect to see that savings in an energy bill. The problem is you can't get to 140 years because the window's going to rot out too fast.
So what do you recommend to the people in those colder climates? Is this an option for them where they can?
There's a couple things. There's one of the things we're offering is a product called Pilkington spacia glass, okay? And it is a vacuum sealed piece of glass, okay? So most insulated glasses are not vacuum sealed, okay? Vacuum is you're sucking the air out of it. They are sealed, but there's still air inside, okay? A vacuum seal is actually where you're sucking all the air out of that, and in this case, there is a little metal nipple, little black dot on the glass in the lower right-hand corner. And if you look closely at that, there's these tiny balls about 1 inch apart. And the balls are a 64th of an inch, maybe 138th of an inch. Teeny, you got to look and see, you just see them. But the glass on the outside has been brazed with glass. Okay, so the glass has been melted together. So the seal is really good. But when you have a insulated piece of glass, it's half an inch apart, is an R value of 1. The similar piece of insulated glass, of vacuum insulated glass, can have an R value of 4 or 7. Okay, so it has a better R value than even the triple pane glass. Anyway, so in those climates, that's
what you would recommend.
What you would use, because the glass is the weak point. Wood is actually a great thermal break. Okay, wood is an insulating property, and if you think about it this way, if you light a match, I mean, you can hold on to that match for a long time. That flame is almost right at your finger before. If you light a match and stick a paper clip in there. And you can have like 2 or 3 inches of paper clip. If you put it in there, that thing will be so hot you'll have to drop that paper clip. What's happening? The transfer of heat through that piece of metal is very fast, and wood is a great thermal insulator, right? And
so when you're looking at windows that have a metal outside, they're just
or steel windows, or
that explains why freaking K-Life houses.
Yes, or the aluminum extruded windows.
Yeah, that's what we have.
Yeah, they're terrible. In fact, they are conducting heat and cold into your house.
Good.
Okay, so
that's what you have.
That's fun.
Typically, glass is the weak point, but when you get into metal and vinyl and all those other things, they aren't as good as wood as the thermal insulator.
Yeah. That's I think that's a really helpful piece of the puzzle, just for a lot of people to understand. Because, you hear a lot like, you got to get the windows replaced to really help change your thing. And
it's probably the biggest lie in remodeling and building today.
But it really is. It works because it makes sense, because you're like, I can see the outside through my window.
Yeah,
I can see the snow piling there. You're like, that's
the weak point.
It's totally commonsensical. Okay, it's totally like, Yeah,
Well, of course it would be the window.
I've sat there by the window. It's so cold. Here's the other thing. And there's more, Jackson.
This is great.
Lay
I think
it
this
on
is
us.
helpful.
Here's
yeah.
more. Most houses do not have insulation pre-1940.
Right.
Okay? So those walls are just wide open. Okay?
So
only about 10% of your energy loss goes out windows.
Where does the rest go?
Walls and ceilings.
Really?
And you're like, what?
Well, I guess because of square footage alone, there's more wall and more ceiling to go around.
And that's because only about 20 to 30% of your wall surface area, floor, wall, ceiling surface area is windows. Okay. So it's a smaller portion, right? It makes sense. And heat rises, goes right through your ceiling, and most old houses don't have insulation in their walls. So it's why I did a video. It's like the biggest bang for your buck is insulation. Just change your insulation. You got a 1920s bungalow, you got 30 windows in it. If they're $2,000 to change each window, $60,000 that you just spent changing the windows, you could insulate that house for, $3,000, $4,000 and actually see a true difference in your energy bills.
Your energy bills, yeah.
So anyway,
energy,
we don't think about it very
efficiency
much.
of the window isn't really like a big deal, honestly, right?
It's not. There are a bunch of good storm windows out there, okay, that are exterior and interior. There's a company called Indow, which is the interior window, but it's basically a storm window that can go inside your house. And so the other people say, well, I put new windows in and it really helped the sound. Well, that's because they're insulated. That's because they're foamed around the outside. That's because they're done that way. But the truth is that there's a sound transmission coefficient, okay, which means that it's testing how sound travels through something.
Yeah, how much it vibrates.
Yeah, the best insulator from sound is laminated glass, okay? And you think about it, there's a plastic film in between those things that are stopping that sound. But insulated glass scores about a 26, and single pane glass scores about a 26, right?
Yeah.
They're about the same. And so to sit there and go, I replaced my windows and it helped the sound so much. No, it just means your windows weren't weather stripped. It means that they've been sealed properly. It's not the glass that's actually helped that thing, according to those, those labs.
Well, when you talk weather stripping, like this is a fascinating thing. I don't know if maybe the microphone will pick it up. I'm gonna pull it in. But like when you're moving this, like that one's moving. But then when we lock that into place and we move this one, that one's not moving at all.
So he's shaking the windows in both times.
I'm shaking, So I'm shaking the window. I'm holding the back one the second time, and then the first time I'm not holding the back one, and I'm not holding the front one. And the front one is not moving at all because
the
weather
lower
stripping.
sash is weather stripped. The upper sash is not.
This one's weather stripped. This one's not. So you can hear this one.
And so
moving.
A lot of times people will be in their house and a car drives by or a big truck drives by and you'll actually hear your windows rattling. And so. Most of the time they're just not weather stripped properly, and weather stripping cost more. When you can look in the original old millwork catalogs, and they charge more for weather stripping them. The best ones are weather stripped, and they perform better.
What is weather stripping traditionally used for?
To keep the
stripping the weather.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I figured it had something to do with the weather, but
seal,
like
between the two wood pieces.
Yeah.
It just kind of seals. It makes everything tight just to keep air out, moisture.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a.
It's foam today a lot of times.
A lot of foam. Sometimes you'll see vinyl used. Historically, it was a sprung bronze or a metal piece. Sometimes a brush that was interlocking oftentimes, but did stop the air from moving back and forth through a window. It's a break. It's a break to keep the weather out.
I feel like some people just will never get it. Like they'll never go for a single pane window. They're just like, no, we're beyond that. That's been what I've gathered from a lot of the comments. They're just like, that's just old things are cool, but we're so far from that.
It is a completely different way of thinking. It is a Well, how long do you want it to last, right? Oh, you must want your window to last 15 years.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you could almost puch back and go, oh, well, you don't mind replacing it then every 15 to 20 years.
Because that's what you're going to be doing.
Maybe that's what you're doing. And they might, rebut, well, I'm only going to be in it 7 years before I move to do something else. And it's just that whole mentality of how people think about the commodity of a house instead of the beauty and architectural integrity and the
Wrong. That's wrong.
sustainability.
The beauty thing, energy efficiency aside, I made a video on our Patreon specifically about this. I compared like the muntins here compared to the one in my garage, where the muntin is just a little vinyl strip. And I even said in that video, look, I don't know anything about energy efficiency. I'm not an expert. Talk to Brent about that. But this looks so much better than that crappy vinyl strip.
Well, what happened too is that I remember when I was first starting in building and insulated glass was really blowing up, the whole, sales pitch was about true divided light and simulated divided light. And simulated divided light is where they tape a piece of wood to the glass, okay, to simulate that it is divided. Okay?
So this is a big sheet right here.
It's the sash you have one big sheet, but you've taped mutton bars on top of it. Okay, the cheaper thing is what he's talking about in his garage, where they don't tape a mutton bar, but they still divide it with a piece of vinyl or something inside the glass. So if you look at the window, you'll go, oh, it's divided light. It's not. There's a grid inside the piece of glass that's conveying this. And then true divided light is where there's two pieces of glass in that sash, and it's truly divided, right? And so the problem with the insulated glass is what Richard was describing earlier with that thing there's still a premium on the true divided light. That's a better product. And so in order to accomplish the energy efficiency, they have to widen the mutton bar in order to hide the weather stripping piece. And it all of a sudden grows to 1.5 inches or 1 9/16 inches. And you're like, it just looks goofy.
Big flat profile. It's just like, what the heck is that?
If there's that
there?
profile that big that you're holding your hand there, Jackson,
stretch it out.
you would look at it and go, what is wrong with that? It just looks goofy.
A little chunky.
Little chunky.
It does not. It's not proportional at all. It looks really bad. And then basically what they're doing with it is it's the same profile shape, but they're just like,
because it's widened
Yeah.
out, it looks even off, I'm sure.
And the other thing that purists will talk about is how deep that mutton bar is. Okay, so the mutton bar is what, 1 inch deep?
It's 1 inch. I just measured
and
it.
So, whereas if you have insulated glass, you're obviously pushing the glass in, 1/2 inch, and so that mutton bar shrinks from 1 inch deep, which has a deep profile, really pretty shadow lines, to this very flat, fat thing that just doesn't look as pretty. But I mean, again, we're kind of a little bit in a detail weedy place, but it does matter.
It does matter, because when I see the houses in my neighborhood, it's like a historical type neighborhood. They come in with the new vinyl things. They're so freaking bright white. They got just little vinyl strips in it. It just does not. It makes the neighborhood look bad.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Okay, so this has been awesome. Been very educated on the window side. I want to get to the question that the title of this video is how much should a window cost? So when we talked about doors, we kind of talked about it from a standpoint of, if I'm the DIYer and I'm trying to fix up my own house, I know that I can go reclaim an old historic door. Are there old historic windows I can go reclaim, or does that option exist out there right now? But I guess the kind of question that I'm considering is, hey, what's the never buy this window? What's the, hey, consider buying these windows because here's the price differentials laid out. Walk me through some of that. Because Renewal by Anderson comes by, quotes my house, and says, hey, we'd like to, offer you windows for your whole thing for $2,000 a window, and you've got 30
Probably less than that.
Less than that? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would be less. Well, to answer your question, in my experience, the salvage question I haven't looked much, but the times that I have looked, it's been very difficult to find like a really good window that was operable and I could like take it and use it. I haven't been able to do that.
I probably wouldn't try to. I mean, even knowing what we do, I probably wouldn't try to go buy a salvaged wood window.
Yeah.
One, size is a problem, but for the amount of labor that's going to take to get that in, I can almost build a new one.
Sweet.
And so, of course, we're doing it the way it should be done, but
it's just not worth it, is what I'm hearing. So,
I mean, I would, if you could get sash that could go into a window.
And sash is
what is sash, Jackson? This part. Yes.
Well,
the upper and lower sash, right?
So this sash, if you can find a sash that maybe could fit.
But the likelihood of you finding a sash that's going to fit your existing wooden frame is pretty low.
So cool. So it's different than the doors.
It's different.
So we're not looking for that. All right. Yeah. So help me out. So I'm looking for my new windows for my house.
Well, I think the cheapest windows would be the one you have in your garage, right?
Yeah,
that's probably
vinyl.
$100 window.
But what's the what?
Probably,
let's start here.
yeah.
Let's start with the never buy. Tell me what not to do first.
Well, like I said about my neighborhood, I wish people would not do that. Not buy those vinyl windows that don't look. They just look bad, especially on a historic house.
Yeah, you're almost when you're talking about what not to buy. There's a sustainability thing. It's not going to last very long, and then there's the ugly factor, right? And majority of those cheap windows are ugly, and so, like Richard's saying, I mean, it's almost don't do it just because it's so dang ugly, and. They talk about windows as being the eyes of the house, and when you change the windows, you really mess up the architectural integrity of the house because there's so many windows on an old house, right? There's, in a new house, you might have 10 windows. In an old house, you might have 30 windows. Remember that the window used to be the air conditioning in the house. And the whole idea behind the double hung was that you would create convection air going through your house. You would lower your top, lower your sash, your upper sash on the north side of your house to let cool air in, and you would raise the lower sash on the south side of your house, and then you'd be creating this convection going through your house.
Wow,
that's build.
Realize that.
That's build science right there.
That is build science.
So you get air movement, right? And the house is more comfortable. Anyway, so they are a very important architectural feature, especially in pre-1940 homes. And so the never buy is a replacement window. Okay. It just won't last, and it's ugly.
So just to define replacement window, I'm never replacing my windows, or what is? Help me out.
You don't have to.
Okay. So
if you have quality,
if you
windows.
have wood windows, you can restore them infinitely many times.
Sweet.
And get them going again. Now, there are times where your sash is rotten or something's happened, or there was a air conditioning unit in there and they took the sash out, or whatever, a window unit, right? And so there are situations where you have to get those replaced, but there are companies that will make replacement sash.
And it'll end up ultimately looking better if you go for one of those companies.
Yeah, I've know one of those companies actually.
Okay, cool.
They will make 100-year windows.
Oh yeah.
There's a group called the WPA, okay, Window Preservation Alliance. We're a part of that, and it's window restoration contractors all over the country. And if you go to Window Preservation Alliance, I think it's .org, you can type in your state or your city or wherever you are, and it'll tell you the list of WPA people there, and they'll actually restore your windows, so you don't have to replace windows.
Cool. Okay, so let's say I just bought a brand new production build, and I'm excited about every feature of it except for the windows because they're...
You bought a brand new production build.
Production build home.
Yeah, D.R. Horton?
Yeah, D.R. Horton just finished my house.
Yeah.
And 60 million other houses alongside it.
Right.
And so I'm in love with this house. Every piece of it's great.
Well, then you're not going to like this
except for the windows. I don't like the windows. What's a window replacement that I should go get? And I know this may not fit the architectural style, but you see the point of my question, right?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, I guess I'm asking, we talked about in our door episode, the reason I'm bringing this up is because in our door episode, we talked about how if you wanted to spend money on something on a house to make, raise the quality of the house really quick, you would buy the front door. You would spend some money on getting a really nice front door. So, if I'm wanting to spend money on getting new windows that are not the vinyl windows in my house.
Thank you. I understand your question now.
What am I trying to go buy?
I don't think you're spending money on windows
You shouldn't spend money on windows.
Because the whole nature of the house, right? The D.R. Horton house that you've bought isn't about windows anymore. It's like when you were telling us about that house that you lived in, you had this beautiful view at the back. There was one window because that's what the plan was. They just didn't have any windows.
Oh, there's no window.
And so the window isn't the architectural feature of the house. The door can be.
It will always be to some extent because of the front door. It's your entryway to the house.
And so windows just don't have the importance or prominence that they used to have, and I would not spend money on windows.
I even feel like that house you brought up, my old production house, like it wouldn't even if you put these in it, it just wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
It just kind of like the whole house is
beauty.
just kind of jacked, you know? I'm just like,
so it's more worth it to go put a down payment on a new house and then to spend the money on a historic home.
It's a disposable. Unfortunately, those houses are a little bit disposable.
it was like I was just telling you guys about the historic homes in my neighborhood putting the vinyl windows in, and that just looked wrong. And I'm thinking about my production house with like finely crafted windows, and that looks wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a weird thought.
They just don't match.
Yeah, it just is not fitting.
It's like ketchup and ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be like you have a card table, right?
Okay.
A plastic card table, and I think I'm giving some Chippendale chairs to put around it. You'd be like, why?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Right? It's just
Spend
like,
your money on a new
doesn't
table.
make any sense.
Yeah. So when in Richard's house, he tells the story about how the vinyl windows, they were falling apart after 11 years, or when you're looking to replace a window, or Renewal by Anderson comes by and says, hey, you need to replace your windows. Is there a better option? Is there an option where you kind of go, hey, this is what a window should cost. This is what a window, because we were trying to answer the question, how much should a window cost? And y'all are just starting to push back now, 50 minutes into the episode, like, yeah, there is no cost.
Okay, so, well, if you'll let me answer the question.
I've only asked it 6 different ways.
So here's the deal. Here's the world, okay, of windows, okay? You've got wood windows. Okay. You've got custom wood windows like a company like ours would make.
Okay.
Most expensive, $3,000, $3,500 a window. Okay. The production windows, $2,000 a window. Okay. Vinyl windows, $1,000, $600,
yeah,
$600. Cheap aluminum, $200, $300, right? So, and then steel, okay, custom steel, like would have been used, $10,000, okay?
Wow,
very expensive. But in my mind, it all goes back to architectural stylings and everything else. Like, if I'm having a very modern house, our window isn't appropriate, right? It's you're going with steel, or you're going with big sheets of glass and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so they are so different. It's almost like, well, you can't really do that in this one, and you can't. That my window doesn't go in that house. It doesn't apply. And so the architectural story is as important for window placement as anything else.
So for that guy, he just bought his D.R. Horton house. Then Anderson comes by and just go with them, right? I mean, they're replacing it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still not spending money on that house.
You would say just go get a HELOC on that house that you just bought and go spend money on a.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not spending money on that house.
I agree. Yeah.
Wow. That's good to hear, and maybe it goes into the savings to get you excited for your next house.
I think the real window question comes in Richard's neighborhood. 20s and 30s and 40s houses. What's your decision there, right?
Okay, well, help me out. What's my decision?
Well, I mean, ideally, you're going back with a wood window, okay? And if you can't afford our window, right, then you're going with a Marvin window, and you're going to work real hard to make sure it's maintained so that it'll last as long as freaking possible, and you hope the glass doesn't fail, right?
Yeah.
But that's a 15 to 20 year solution, okay? And look, if it's covered, maybe it lasts a little bit longer, but in general, that glass is going to fail in that amount of time. And so let's say you have 30 windows.
And you're saying the insulated glass or the double pane glass is going to fail in that amount of time. Not, because you're saying glass doesn't fail, and then you're like, glass might fail.
insulated glass, the seal fails,
yeah.
right? It's not the glass that's failing, it's the seal that's failing. And with a production window, the wood can fail as well. That's why I was saying if it's under a porch and the wood isn't getting any weather, maybe it lasts longer, but the glass is going to fail. I think let's just do some math. And so if you've got 30 windows in your house, in 1920s house, do you spend $2,000 a window for Marvin, so that's $60,000, or do you spend $4,000 for ours, and that's $120,000, right? Well, I mean, the house is probably goes on the market for $500,000, $800,000, whatever. Is spending an extra $60,000 on windows, good bang for your buck? I mean, if I'm going to stay there and that's going to be my forever house, then I might do it. But I'm not sitting there telling somebody you got to spend money on that window. I'd probably say, look, why don't you spend $20,000 restoring them, and then you don't have to do anything.
Yeah. Well, and then the other question, even to just put the money thing into perspective, let's say some ding dong came along before you and bought the house, and like in your neighborhood,
and that's common.
Put in the vinyl windows, right? Just got them replaced, put in the vinyl windows. Now you're buying the house back. Your vinyl windows are falling apart. You've just bought it. The vinyl windows break down. Now that decision of $120,000 to $60,000 becomes much more of like a real consideration, because let's say you're planning on, you just put a 30-year mortgage down on the house. You're saying Marvin windows may have about 17, 20 years in them, just theoretically. So you're spending $60,000 for every 20 years, or if this is going to be a house that gets passed down to your kids or whatever. Now, is that something you want to spend $120,000 on to where they will last, 4 times as long as those Marvin windows?
Well, here's the bigger rub, okay? And another way to think it: if you are going to stay in there for 30 years, right? I'm telling you, after 20 years and your windows start failing, you're going to be really frustrated that you didn't put a better window in there, right? Because the first time you replace them, you should have spent money on the longer lasting windows. Yeah. And so if you're planning on spending 25 plus years in that house, I mean,
do it.
Well, it makes it's hard to me when you think you're spending. Let's say you spent $800,000 on the house, to spend another $120,000 on windows, right? Because your budget's already maxed. I mean, typically you're trying to buy a house that you can barely afford.
Right. That's what we do.
It's what we do, right? What can I afford? Okay, that's where I'm going.
And then you stretch it a little bit.
You stretch it. And so to put another $120,000 on top of that is a hard decision. Yeah. And so,
I'm saying this houseless. I'm saying this as renter. So this is not me saying.
No, but it's actually a great realistic thing that happens. Is you get into it and someone screwed up your windows.
Yeah, and I think it really is, now that you're bringing up all these scenarios, it's like a really personal thing. Like, it matters where you are in life, how long you're going to be there, how much you care about the look of the house. There's so many things that go into it. It's really hard to answer.
Another hard one is Austin's house. Okay, so built in the 40s, right? He's got steel windows, original steel windows. Okay, which are awesome. Okay, and to replace them is probably $10,000 to $15,000 a window, right? In steel.
That's crazy.
But they're incredibly inefficient.
You excited about that?
They're incredibly inefficient. Now, as an architectural story, and because we're in Texas, where heat gain's your problem and things like that, I wouldn't worry about the fact that they're steel and they're inefficient. I would worry about heat gain, right? And heat gain's the sun, and so I would be putting films on his windows so that they would stop the heat gain and stop the UV. But I would, because the architectural integrity is really important to me, and those steel windows look so cool, right? They are defining elements of his house. I would say we keep them. And then you can walk around the back of his house and point out immediately where the replacement windows are, and they stand out like a sore thumb.
That's crazy.
Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
He said, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking the reason your windows are more is because now that I'm building that window, what goes all into it, it's crazy. Like the glass, the glazing, like it's a very finely crafted thing. So I feel like it's worth it, but maybe my wallet doesn't feel like it's worth it.
Right.
It's just
But
you're gonna have to
that's
answer
a
it.
character-defining window that you've built, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Because your house can carry that look, and it'll be gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have the big sheets of glass on the side of that main living room, and they just irritate me bad. I'm just like, ugh, it's a big sheet of glass. But then I'm like, it's staying though, because I don't have the money to screw around with that.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna build these little windows and as I go. But it's very labor intensive, and that's why I say like anything we talk about here that we really fall in love with is expensive because it's so finely crafted. Me and my wife joke about like if we're looking at a book of things and we pick something, we always, without even like seeing we always pick the most expensive thing just because it's like, whoa, that looks good. Let's go with that. And then the person's like, oh yeah, that one is our most expensive. And it's like, of course. We always, so yeah.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? The really well done, the things that take time and take quality, they draw us in and they attract us, and it makes sense. So just to turn the question back on you guys one more time, how much should a window cost?
I don't know really, because I haven't ever bought them or really messed around with windows too much, but based off all the work I just did on that one, I probably would charge like $2,000 for that window that I built. Yeah.
That makes sense. It's a beautiful window. And that's live on your channel right now, right?
No.
It hasn't yet?
I kind of haven't been posting actually.
Okay, great. Yeah, perfect.
Nobody knows about that window actually, so
okay.
I'll have to send you some footage.
Yeah, it's cool. And then how much should a window cost?
I think it's a bad question. Let's start over. It depends. It depends how big. It depends what the architectural style is. But I don't look at it as how much should a window cost. I look at it as how long should a window last. And I would say a window should last 100 years.
Yeah,
because it has the ability.
You're looking at it from the
consumer side.
Yeah, I
side.
totally am, and I think a lot of people out there are. But I think whenever you phrase it, I think my mind shifts immediately if you tell me that I'm gonna have to buy a window 5 different times. You know what I mean? Like my mind, if you tell me, windows are built to break down, I'm gonna go, great. I'm never buying another bad window ever again. It makes me mad, and I don't want to give that person business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that gets on my nerves. So I think the way you're phrasing it, like it's not about how much a window should cost. It's about how long a window should last. And I mean, I'm sitting here saying that as the son of the guy who made the 100-year window. So that's not a subtle plug. That's really just like,
he gets
frustrating.
He gets a commission. No.
I wish. Wow, that would be a nice commission. I'd take that on one house. You know what I mean? All right. Well, guys, thanks for watching the Passion for Craft podcast this week. Man, hopefully this opened your eyes as much as it did mine about the windows as a whole. 100-year double hung. I learned so much about that.
Nice.
Thanks for watching. Join us on Patreon to continue the conversation over Discord. Get to talk more with each of us, and get to see some cool things from Brent's library, as well as some practical applications done by Richard.
I will win this duel competition.
Oh, we haven't talked about that. Well, a side project that we're going to do, it's going to be a future episode. You have this to look forward to. We talked about it a little bit off camera, but we are doing a stool competition. So that's not how well we can poop.
That's what I thought.
I heard you laugh. I was like, that's why. No.
We're all going to
provide
a stool sample.
All right. We're moving on. What we're going to do is we're all going to do our best to build a 3-legged stool. And we are going to see how everyone does. We're going to look at a couple of different features of it. We're going to judge them based off of beauty, and then function as well. Ideally, they should all function.
Strength.
Special guest judge, probably.
Yep. Special guest judge, TBA. And, so we're going to see.
TBD.
No, announced. We've decided.
Oh.
Right? Don't we
To
want?
be determined.
we know who it is, don't we? We've determined who it is.
We got to ask him.
To be announced. We just have to ask the guy. We're excited about it, though. So, we're going to compete to build the best stool. It's a 3-legged stool is the requirements. We're going to judge it based off of how it looks and how it functions. And then we'll look at overall things like tools used, the cost of them, as well as, how each of us went about it. It's going to be a really fun competition where you should see about it on each of our channels. So really be looking forward to my channel.
No CNCs, no Vossels.
Well, if you have the tool at your disposal, you're welcome to use it.
Or to buy it.
Or buy it. That's right. So I'm going to commission mine from
Crate and Barrel. Okay.
Thanks for watching.